Hey guys, this is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the podcast. Today I want to talk about 3 stories that are in the news. And unless you're living under a rock, you've been listening like I have. And they're going to look completely unrelated on the surface. One is about the WNBA. And we're asking the question again, because we're just that stupid. What is a woman? The other thing I'm going to talk about is what's being put into our food. So back in the headlines again, what are we putting in our children's bodies? And the third involves newly released text messages from Fauci about COVID vaccines and pregnancy. These are different headlines, different institutions, and different issues. But underneath all of them, the same thread is running. Who can we trust? It's truth and transparency and trust. Are we still willing to tell the truth when it costs us something socially? Ketanji Brown Jackson's not willing to tell the truth when it costs her something. Father Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians, not willing to tell the truth when it costs him something. And I got a question. Are the people in charge being honest about what they know and about what they don't know? And can ordinary Americans, especially parents, ask hard questions without being dismissed or labeled? That's what we're going to be talking about today. That's what we're going to be looking at. And we're going to start with a question that should never have become controversial. What is a woman? This is the Heidi St. John podcast. I'm glad you're here. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. All right, you guys. So I hope you're paying attention. I really do. Because if you're paying attention, you are having the time of your life watching the WNBA squirming, trying to answer the question, what is a woman? They're being pushed into a national debate right now over transgender athletes. And this really should have been a straightforward thing, but it's not, because we've lost our collective minds because we want to be accepted by the culture at large. So if you're not familiar with the story, the Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham, who has become the new hero of girls who are actually sane, has publicly said that biological males should not compete in women's sports. A moment of silence for Sophie Cunningham. So she's framed her position around protecting women's competition and opportunities for girls, not unlike my friend Riley Gaines, who rose to public notoriety because of Leah Thomas, the dude who swam against her and basically took away her trophy. Amazing stuff that's happening. So Golden State Valkyries player Gabby Williams has taken a different position, and she has expressed support for transgender athletes who want to enter the WNBA. Now, keep in mind, this is the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. So now things are getting dicey because some former NBA players and a guy named Royce White and another guy, and I can't think of his name, have said that they now want to declare for the 2027 WNBA draft amid the controversy. And they're asking a question that we should all be asking. If biological sex isn't what determines eligibility for a women's league, then what does? And if I could identify as a Black lesbian podcaster, what's to stop me from trying to get you guys pulled into my new reality as a Black lesbian podcaster? What is it? Is it reality itself? And that really is the question. So neither of these guys actually wants to play in the WNBA, and they haven't been accepted. They're trying to prove a point, and it's absolutely working. The WNBA leadership now has to discuss their transgender athlete eligibility, and they're going to have to draw some clear lines because biological sex actually matters. Biology isn't bigotry. Now, there's some context here. Right now, there are no openly transgender women playing in the NBA. The immediate controversy, and this is why these two men, these former NBA players, this is why it's so important. The immediate controversy right now is about policy. Remember, you guys, I'm always telling you this is why politics is so important. Politics determines policy, and policy shapes the nation. So the WNBA right now exists as a separate women's league because biological sex has significant advantages on the court. Significant advantages. And it's ridiculous for us to say that there's anything different. The fact that Sophie Cunningham is being mocked by the left and by the trans activists in our country and around the world right now should show you something about the spiritual condition that our world is living in right now. If male and female bodies didn't actually matter athletically, we wouldn't need separate leagues. We wouldn't need separate locker rooms. We wouldn't ask for separate changing spaces. It turns out our bodies are different. And protecting women's sports isn't about hatred. It's not about treating people poorly. It's just about acknowledging that we're not all the same, and that's okay. But we live in grievance culture right now. And the grievance culture would say, well, I want to be this, and so therefore you need to allow me to be what I pretend to be in my mind. So in other words, we're elevating now mental illness. Gender dysphoria is a real thing, don't get me wrong, but it's a mental illness. And you don't treat somebody's anorexia by telling them, yeah, you're right, you're fat. That's not how you treat someone who's 85 pounds. And when they look in the mirror, they see a 350 pound person. You don't treat them by joining into their delusion with them. You treat them by saying, hey, I love you. Also, you're 85 pounds and you're wasting away. You treat anorexia with truth, and you treat transgenderism with truth also. And the truth is this: there is no such thing as a man born in a woman's body or vice versa. Biological sex matters, and every human being deserves dignity, but dignity should never require that we deny biological reality. And that is what the WNBA has been doing. So if biological sex isn't the eligibility standard, then the WNBA is going to have to explain what the eligibility standard actually is. And they're going to have to say why the W even matters. Now, listen, I don't really like the WNBA. Frankly, I don't really like the NBA either. Your girl Heidi's not much of a sports fanatic, but I love that we're having this discussion because these two former NBA players are essentially forcing the question to its logical conclusion. And hopefully it's going to bring about something that we desperately need in this country right now. And that is, wait for it, common sense. We need to be able to tell the truth. And I'm here to tell you that when people like Ketanji Brown Jackson tell you they can't tell you what a woman is because they're not a biologist, her problem isn't that she's not a biologist. Her problem is that she's a coward and she's bending to the social contagion, the social pressure that the alphabet mafia has foisted on her. And that tells me she's going to be a terrible justice. And guess what? She has been. So what Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White are actually doing in declaring for the 2027 WNBA draft is they're going to force the issue. And the issue has got to come front and center because we've got to be talking about it. If biological sex isn't what determines eligibility for women's sports, then pray tell, what is it? I really like to know. Is it the color of your eyes? Is it how you feel every Friday morning when you roll out of bed? How are we determining what a woman is? And when I talk about these issues, the reason I'm so frustrated by the whole thing is because I think that the side of transgenderism is filled with liars and cheats and people who would bend to social pressure because they don't want to stand up for the truth because they just can't stand the pressure. They can't stand the tension. I'd put Ketanji Brown Jackson in that category. Ketanji Brown Jackson, a sitting Supreme Court justice in the United States, in the highest court of our land. When she was being interviewed for the job, you guys might remember, she famously said when they asked her what a woman was, Marsha Blackburn, who, by the way, just handily won the primary for governor of Tennessee, but I digress. Marsha Blackburn asked her, what is a woman? And Ketanji Brown Jackson, this very highly educated Black woman, who is also, by the way, wait for it, a coward and a liar. And I said what I said. She knows what a woman is. And she said, because she's a coward, that she feels she can't answer the question because she's not a biologist. I called her a liar. I called her a coward because she refused to tell the truth. And I call her a liar because she knows the truth and she's pretending like she doesn't. It's ridiculous. And this woman sits on the highest court in our land. And when I saw that interview, I knew she'd be a terrible justice. And guess what? She's been a terrible justice, but I digress. So while these guys have not been accepted into the NBA, what they're doing is brilliant because they're forcing the issue into the public arena. And that's exactly where it needs to be hashed out. So it's important to note right now that there's no openly transgender women playing in the WNBA. So the conversation is about policy and principle. And you guys remember, I've been telling you for a long time, this is why politics is so important. Politics determines policy and policy shapes the nation. Policy is what's going to shape the WNBA. and principle should be behind policy. This is why platforms matter. You're not voting necessarily, you're voting for a person, but what you're really voting for when you choose a side is you're deciding which platform you can most closely align yourself with. I was speaking at an event recently and I said, I do not understand how anyone can say that they are a Christian and vote for the Democrat Party, because the Democratic platform has literally set itself up against the things of God. Now, that's not me saying that everything that happens in the Republican Party is above board and pure as the driven snow, because there are people in the Republican Party and they're evil on both sides of the political aisle. That is absolutely a fact. But we need to be leaning into the platform. What you see in a platform is a reflection of both policy and principle. And that is the conversation that's being held right now in the WNBA. The WNBA exists as a separate women's league because biological sex has competitive significance in athletics. And that's the fact. Women's sports exist for a reason. If male and female bodies didn't matter athletically, we wouldn't need a women's sports league. We wouldn't need separate locker rooms. But the fact of the matter is that we're different. And when you decide to protect women's sports, it's not about hating people. It's not about treating people poorly. It's about telling the truth. And the question remains, do we have the courage to tell the truth in the culture when it's unpopular? And shockingly, people are afraid to say what a woman is. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. So, hey, WNBA's got a big decision to make. This is going to be a tough one for them, because if biological sex isn't the eligibility standard, they're going to have to explain what the standard actually is. You guys, I am totally here for this. I'm completely here for it. Listen, I don't even like sports, okay? I don't watch the NBA. I certainly don't watch the WNBA. I just don't care. And I know a lot of you do, and that's great, but I am absolutely here for this conversation because they're forcing it to the front of the line. And I think it's great. So Ennis Contra Freedom, Royce White, they're essentially going to force the question to its logical conclusion. And of course, the conclusion is a woman is born with female chromosomes. Full stop. End of story. The transgender movement is built on a lie. There is no such thing as a transgender person. That's why my friend Walt Heyer, and I'm gonna put a link to his conversation with me in the show notes today, because it's just such a great conversation for us to be remembered. The transgender movement is built on a lie, and we are injuring children. And shame on these. I hope they go to prison for transing children. I really do. I hope we reach a point in this country where when you've got a doctor who's willing to cut off the reproductive organs of a healthy little boy who will then never be able to orgasm, never have children. We see this happening all the time in young people who are now regretting that they allowed a surgeon who for money lied to them and cut off their body parts. Shame on these guys. I hope they go to prison, every single one of them. I'd be happy to see the WNBA go bankrupt over this. I'm here for it. Tell the truth. It's so ridiculous. This is not limited, by the way, to professional basketball, because what happens in the professional and collegiate levels eventually trickles down to, wait for it, high school, youth sports, every opportunity you can possibly imagine for our daughters. And when you see somebody like Riley Gaines stepping up to the plate and telling the truth, I'm telling you what, you guys, it comes at a very high price. We should not be afraid to say that women's spaces and women's sports deserve protection and should be reserved for, wait for it, women. This is why I'm so angry at the Port of Portland and Portland's International Airport. They just did this incredible, beautiful remodel at the Portland International Airport, and they installed what they're calling all-user restrooms. So what it means is we all now walk into a shared space, and they're beautiful. I mean, the wallpaper's gorgeous. The mirrors are lighted. You don't have that crazy, awful overhead lighting that we all battle with when we go to the regular restroom or we go to hotel rooms. So they're beautiful. But when I come out of the restroom, I want to stand at the sink and wash my hands next to, wait for it, a woman. That should be a private space reserved for women. And shame on the Port of Portland for trying to normalize this insanity, this lunacy. It's ridiculous. So how do we reach a place where saying women's sports should be for women and that's somehow controversial? We did it because we have decided that truth is not worth defending. And I've said this here 100 times. I'm going to say it again. Truth is a hill worth dying on. Every pastor in America should be talking about this. Every Christian should be using their social media for it. The Bible teaches us in Genesis 1:27 that we were created male and female. Jesus in Matthew 19 pointed back to creation. He said, he who created them from the beginning made them, wait for it, male and female. So transgenderism is a lie on its face. It's both a biological lie and a spiritual lie, and it is devastating. And this really comes down to whether or not we're still willing to acknowledge what's true. And if we are, we need to start asking the obvious questions, which is why I love these two players from the NBA forcing this issue to the front, because we're seeing the same issue play out in a completely different area with MAHA and children's health. Remember how we used to love going to the movies? I have missed watching beautiful stories with real characters and endings that left me feeling hopeful instead of embarrassed. Well, I've got good news for you guys, because Angel Studios is bringing back movies for the whole family. They have made a romantic movie without explicit content. There's an idea. It's beautiful, it's uplifting, and it's easy to recommend, which is what I'm doing for you guys right now. I'm talking about a movie titled Seeking Persephone. It is set in Regency, England, and Persephone marries to save her family. Her husband, the Duke of Kildare, believes that he's beyond love until trust, kindness, and forgiveness slowly change both of them. This is a love story that's built on character, which means no awkward scenes. It's great storytelling for all ages, so pop some popcorn and make an evening of it. That's what the St. John's did. Head on over to angel.com/Heidi and start streaming Seeking Persephone on Angel today. I think you're going to love it. So I hope you guys are continuing to watch the news, because this stuff, I mean, I'm telling you what, pop some popcorn, just sit back, watch the culture. Because the FDA on August 10th proposed a major change to the way that food ingredients classified as generally recognized as safe, or GRAS, GRAS, generally recognized as safe, are handled. Let me just ask you guys a question. Okay. So work with me here. So if the FDA, let's say 4 years ago, for example, and the FDA saying, this is GRAS, this is generally recognized as safe. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Do you trust them? Because your girl Heidi, I don't trust them. I think everything they do is pretty much for money. So under the existing system, manufacturers can independently determine what certain ingredients meet the GRAS standard without necessarily notifying the FDA. So they're proposing a change. The proposed change would require companies to notify the FDA of new generally recognized as safe determinations, giving regulators and the public greater, wait for it, visibility, transparency. Is it okay with you guys if we know what's in our food? I hope that's okay, because since I'm going to eat it and stuff. That's why I keep telling you guys, pay attention to what's in your water. Get a water filter. Go visit my friends at Century H2O. You're welcome. I'm getting them for all of my kids to put in their houses, because even though they're renting most of my kids, they can move them from house to house. We should know what's in our water. We should know what's in our food. We should know what's being added to America's food supply. This is like as duh as what is a woman. And yet we're having conversations like this. It's amazing. And this fits into the broader MAHA agenda, because they're focusing on, and I applaud Kennedy for this, they're focusing on chronic disease, food additives, ultra-processed food, and transparency in labeling for the food that we eat. It's about time, because Americans deserve to know what's in their food. I feel like this is just normal. It's amazing to me that we're having these conversations. Parents should need a chemistry degree to understand the ingredient label. And in fact, Jay and I picked up a drink that I really liked the other day from Costco. And he was looking at the ingredients. He was like, what? We didn't even know what the label meant. So we took a picture of it and we uploaded it to chat. I didn't even tell you about this, did I, Bonnie? We took a picture of it. We uploaded it to chat, and chat said, oh, this is this, and this is this, and this. Well, then why can't you say that? Oh, that's just another word for vitamin C. Well, why can't you just say that? I mean, can we just boil it down so that people like Heidi St. John don't need a degree in chemical engineering to be able to read the labels of what's in our food? Why have companies been able to make certain safety determinations without even notifying the FDA? There's a good question for you. Transparency doesn't remove, by the way, personal responsibility. It just allows your family to exercise it. And so the Make America Healthy movement And I was in Washington, D.C. recently, and there's entire buildings with giant banners hanging down the sides that say, "Make America Healthy Again." I'm here for it. And they're asking a really important question. Why are Americans experiencing so much chronic disease? And what role are our food and our environment playing in it? Food is medicine. And I'm about limited government. All right. I don't want the government making every health decision for families, but we've got to have accurate information so that we can make right decisions for our families, right? We got to have accurate information. Is it too much to ask that we can understand what's in our food and be able to make an informed choice? Why shouldn't Americans know what's being put in our food and how it's determined whether or not it's safe? Which brings me, of course, to Trump changing the childhood vaccine schedule. Snaps for President Trump. I love that he did this. I voted for this. The Trump administration targeting the CDC childhood vaccine schedule for reassessment. So in January 2026, HHS announced a restructuring of the childhood immunization recommendations after reviewing the U.S. schedule and comparing it with schedules that are used by other developed nations. Have you guys looked at the vaccine schedule recently? You should look. It'll break your brain just looking to see all the diseases they want to pump into your little tiny babies. It'll just break your brain. So the previous framework had immunizations against 17 diseases for all children. Now, I guess my question always is that necessary? So for example, I did not, even before it was cool, I did not vaccinate my kids against the chickenpox because I thought if you get the chickenpox, then you're going to have natural immunity. Guess what? I got the chickenpox when I was a kid 3 times. And the last time I got it, guys, it was no fun. I mean, I had chickenpox in my ears. I had them on my eyelids. I had them in places where the sun don't shine. That was not fun. Well, I did get to stay home from school for quite a while. But you know what? My mother had a chickenpox party. They wanted us to get the chickenpox because they knew that we would get natural immunity. Natural immunity is kind of where it's at. And so the January framework that Trump introduced would have retained universal recommendations covering 11 diseases and moving several others, including COVID-19. Do not get that shot. Including COVID-19, influenza. Listen, I'm not your typical anti-vaxxer. My kids were vaccinated. But every time I got the flu shot, I've gotten it twice. I've had the worst flu of my life. I'll never do it again. And of course, I didn't get the COVID-19 shot because I knew right away at the beginning they were lying. Something was terribly wrong. But they're moving these. So COVID-19, influenza, rotavirus, meningococcal, disease, chickenpox, hepatitis A, they give newborns Hep B in the hospital. Why? This is a sexually transmitted disease, and they want to give my brand new baby who just arrived out of the clear perfection of amniotic fluid a vaccine for a sexually transmitted disease. Why is that? Could it be Satan? Does anybody remember the church lady? Do you guys remember the church lady, Dana Carvey? I'm kind of dating myself, but from the 80s. Remember, and everything was, could it be Satan? I actually think that this might apply here. So you're going to give your brand new newborn baby a Hep B vaccine. Could it be Satan? I mean, I'm just asking the question. It's like Candace Owens. I'm just asking questions. It's fine. It's fine. So they're moving these out from the must-have into the periphery. So toward recommendations for certain high-risk groups or shared clinical decision makings between parents and healthcare providers. In other words, if the parent says, I really want my newborn to get Hep B, you can get it, but we're not going to recommend it. So we're not going to say no, but also we're not going to force you to do it and make you feel like you're a bad parent if you won't do it. So the January changes are not currently in place because a federal judge stayed the January 2026 decision in March, along with several earlier changes. So the CDC currently says that because of the court order, its July 2nd, 2025 immunization schedule are presently operative while this thing moves through the courts. So while the litigation continues, they're still they're still using the July 2nd, 2025 immunization schedule. I can't wait for this to be a permanent feature of the American landscape. Can we please stop pumping our little children full of vaccines that they do not need? Why can't we periodically reevaluate? Why is this, a sacred cow that we're not allowed to touch, not allowed to talk about? And now that we know that, Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians, was basically lying the whole time, probably this is a good time to reassess a lot of things, especially if his name was on it. So asking questions about a vaccine recommendation doesn't make me anti-vaccine. I just feel like I need to say that again. I actually think that some of the vaccines are good and that we should keep doing them. I mean, maybe don't throw the baby out with bathwater. But the bathwater has an awful lot of unnecessary childhood vaccines in it. It's yucky water. So I also think in the same veins that claims that vaccines are dangerous should have to withstand scrutiny and evidence. Maybe some people, including a couple of dear friends of mine, wouldn't have died from the COVID vaccine if it had been tested. Oh, man, it makes me angry. Should every vaccine be universally recommended, do you think? This is a good question. Or should some decisions depend upon a child's individual circumstances and risk? There's a good question for you. We need informed consent. Informed consent requires parents to understand the risks and the benefits and the alternatives and any meaningful mitigation circumstances that might be mitigating factors in whether or not we decide to give our kids a vaccine. And if you're in the public health industry and this is part of your institution that you love, these questions should be welcomed. I would think everybody was like, yeah, absolutely. We're here because we care about your health. So let's absolutely ask these questions. And if these institutions, if the CDC and the NIH and the FDA and all the other three-letter, institutions, if they want to rebuild trust, they need to start openly inviting questions. Just invite the question. So reevaluating the vaccine schedule is not the same as saying all vaccines are unsafe and all vaccines are unnecessary. That is not my position. I want to continue to reiterate it. But the larger issue is whether or not recommendations should be continually examined based on ongoing evidence. When we learn something new, we should be able to change our mind. Remember, you always saying, you don't know what you don't know? This is what I said about Joe Kent when they tried to pressure me to drop out of the race. And I said, listen, when I said I would drop out of the race, I didn't know that the guy wasn't actually who he said he was. I didn't know that Joe Kent was a closet Democrat. I didn't know he'd voted for Bernie Sanders. I didn't know he'd voted for Hillary Clinton. I didn't know he wasn't really a Republican, but I know now. And you don't know what you don't know. When you learn new information, you should be able to change your mind. Hey, I feel like that's an important point. So if we're talking about our children, shouldn't parents be able to ask questions about everything that is being put into their body? Food additives, vaccines, and they shouldn't be immediately dismissed for it? I think so. This is straight out of scripture. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, test everything. Hold fast to what is good. So if you're wondering why so many Americans have lost trust in our public health institutions, look no further than the new released messages from Father Fauci. They're giving us yet another reason to talk about transparency. We don't trust our institutions because they've failed us over and over and over again. And if you're not watching what's happening up on Capitol Hill, I told you guys last week that Fauci, of course, took the fifth, 111 times, something ridiculous like this. And so Senator Rand Paul and Ron Johnson decided, oh, that's fine. And they released an initial batch of messages that were recovered from Anthony Fauci's government-issued cell phone as part of their continuing investigation into the flawed and deadly federal response to COVID. Now, according to the senators, his phone contained more than 34,000 text messages and 522 voicemails. And just so you guys know, the internet is forever. And your phone, I'm just saying. So one newly released January of 2021 conversation involved Fauci. The then director of the CDC, a chick named Rochelle Walensky, and the then Surgeon General, some dude named Vivek Murthy, and they were discussing COVID vaccination during pregnancy. Now, I had guests on my show during this time. You guys might recall. I had some of the America's frontline doctors on the show, and they were warning. They were begging people, do not take this shot if you are pregnant. If you want to risk it for yourself, okay. If you're pregnant, bad idea. So on privately, January 25th, 2021, Fauci discussed the inflammatory response and the fever that could occur following a second COVID vaccine dose. He wrote, and I'm quoting, theoretically, it could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. Why wasn't this front page news? Why didn't every clinic in America, every hospital, every doctor, why wasn't this on the news? Why weren't they like, hey, if you're thinking about getting pregnant or if you're newly pregnant, hey, we just want to say don't get the COVID vaccine. But no, they didn't do that. This discussion, by the way, took place during a period when pregnancy-specific vaccine data were still limited. And yet Fauci, the fraudster Fauci, knew that it posed a risk, and he didn't say it. By the way, the texts don't show that he admitted the COVID vaccines were causing miscarriages. He was just saying, yeah, it could be associated, I don't know. It could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. This guy, I hope he goes to jail. I really do. I mean, let's line him up, okay? Fraudster Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians, and every surgeon who has ever cut off the healthy reproductive organs of a child did not pass go, did not collect $200, straight to prison. Straight to prison. So even though Fauci was raising a theoretical concern, they knew that there could be a problem and they didn't tell us. And subsequent large studies are saying, could have been a problem. I feel like we had a right to know that information. So they knew what the officials knew and what they didn't know and how clearly they communicated to pregnant women, totally up for debate. This is why nobody trusts these guys. Pregnant women deserve to know what officials knew and what they didn't know, what they think might happen, what they were postulating behind closed doors, what they were thinking, this could happen. It's perfectly legitimate for scientists to say, by the way, we don't know yet. We haven't quite figured that out. And that's where informed consent comes back to the forefront because it requires more than simply telling somebody what a health official recommends. And this is kind of where the problem lies because that uncertainty was not communicated publicly. Instead, what we were told was it'll reduce transmission. That was a lie. Masks will help. That was a lie. Social distancing works. 6 feet, 6 feet. That was a lie. Thank you to the lady in Safeway who yelled and screamed at me as I was leaning over the pot roast section in the refrigerator section at Safeway, who yelled 6 feet while her mask was dangling from beneath her nose. I hope we hold these guys accountable. And later on, if evidence comes out, they should acknowledge it. They should, because transparency works both ways. We don't want to exaggerate something that's not there, but if we think it might be there, American people have the right to know. We're concerned about this. The data's not in. We don't know how that's going to go down, but instead they're like, absolutely, it's safe. Go for it. Straight to prison. Good grief. So here's a question. If our public health officials were privately discussing potential risks and they were acknowledging the gaps in the data, don't you think they should have communicated this clearly to pregnant women so that they could make informed decisions about what they put into their bodies and potentially subjected their unborn babies to? Straight to prison. Just so frustrating. So the stories might seem unrelated, but they're not. Can you guys see where I'm going? The WNBA, food additives, childhood vaccines, and Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Davidians. Here's the common thread. Truth, transparency, and trust. The 3 T's are what we got a big problem with in our country right now. In the WNBA, the question is simple. Are we willing to acknowledge that biological reality, even when it's culturally unpopular? Are we willing to acknowledge that there is such a thing as biological reality? So far, not enough people are willing to do that. Truth matters. Truth is a hill worth dying on. If you're taking notes today, write that down. Truth is a hill worth dying on. If we can't tell the truth, we're in trouble. As it relates to our food, we're talking about transparency. Do Americans know what's being put in their food? Do they know how the safety of that particular substance was determined? Lack of transparency. Same thing with vaccines. Can parents question and reevaluate recommendations involving their children without being dismissed? And the unfortunate reality is, if you go to any mainstream hospital and any mainstream, if you go to a massive, clinic that's run by, around here, it'd be run by something like the Vancouver Clinic. And I'm not accusing the Vancouver Clinic. I'm just saying this is a very large conglomerate of clinics that operate all around this area. Hundreds of doctors, thousands of patients. And the reality is, when you go to a lot of systems like this and you say, well, I don't want my kid to get this or that vaccine. I know this because it's happened to me and it's happened to my daughters. They treat you like you have 6 heads and like you're an abusive parent. That needs to stop. We should be able to ask questions. We should be able to reevaluate recommendations when new evidence comes out. And as it relates to Fauci, and I really wonder about this, when the government scientists were uncertain, did Americans hear that same uncertainty that the officials expressed privately? Were we privy to that? And the answer is a resounding no. Straight to prison. We shouldn't be afraid to ask questions about this stuff. It doesn't fall into the same category, by the way, as Candace Owens. I mean, I'm out of words for this woman. Well, I'm out of nice words. But if something's true, it'll be able to withstand scrutiny. That's why the Bible is still hanging in there, because it's true. People have been trying to disprove the Bible and the resurrection and the existence of Jesus for thousands of years, but they won't be able to, because it's true. And institutions don't rebuild trust by demanding it. They rebuild trust by telling the truth and being transparent about what they know and what they don't know, and then allowing people to ask the hard questions. And I would say inviting those hard questions and then holding fast to the pursuit of truth. Truth is a hill worth dying on. Guys, our culture, it's upside down. It's on its head in every conceivable way right now. And there's a few bright spots on the calendar coming up. One of them is my women's retreat, October 9th through 11th in Rockaway Beach, Oregon. The culture is constantly redefining truth. We are going to spend a weekend leaning into what is true. Leaning into what God says is true about identity, about family, about your purpose. It's very easy to feel disoriented, and God's word is reorienting. So the theme of my women's retreat this year is Restore the Story. And it's a weekend that I've designed to bring you back to the beginning, back to God's good and beautiful design. And if you're interested in joining me, spaces are filling up. heidistjohn.com/restore the story or heidistjohn.com/retreat. I hope you guys will check that out. That's my women's retreat. And I've had several people ask, can I bring my teenage daughter? The answer is a resounding yes. We'll have several moms bringing their daughters this weekend. So bring your women's ministry, bring your Bible study, come by yourself. We had a lot of people come by themselves last year, and it's going to be amazing. You're not going to want to miss it. June 7th through the 16th of 2027, you guys can join me for an unforgettable tour through Turkey. We're going to be visiting the 7 churches of Revelation and experiencing the biblical history of this incredible region. You can learn more and register by going to heidistjohn.com/events, heidistjohn.com/events. Make sure you guys are following the podcast so you never miss an episode. I would really appreciate it if you would share this episode with a friend. And don't forget, you can pre-order my book right now, Standing Fast in These Last Days, an urgent call to faithfulness in a world of compromise. We'd love it if you guys would buy that book right now on Amazon. I think you're going to love it. It's going to come out with a corresponding workbook. And very, very soon, we're going to be giving you guys information about a launch team. We're going to be accepting applications to be on the launch team, and I'll get more information for you guys as we have it. We should have it here in the coming weeks. Be sure and follow me on social media for clips and updates and encouragement throughout the week. And don't forget, the Heidi St. John podcast is now coming to you 5 days a week. We love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to my sponsor, MyFreedomCart, changing the way Americans are shopping. An American company made in America for Americans, not woke, not toxic, delivered right to your door, including world-class, fabulously sourced beef from Riverbend Ranch. My mouth's watering just thinking about it. MyFreedomCart.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you back here again at the intersection of faith